The world of magic doesn't end with the turning of a page. Love rises and falls anew, forbidden like poison or blazing like a phoenix's flame. The heroes we thought we knew uncover their hearts once more. So step into the enchantment of emotion and welcome to a world where love is written anew. The wand left her hand before she even realized it. One sharp flick of Draco Malfoy's wrist, swift, practiced, almost reflexive, and Hermione's wand was his. It arced through the air, landed solidly in his pale hand, and for a second, the only sound in the library was the echo of its fall. Books hovered mid-air, parchment drifted to the floor like startled birds. Hermione froze, still bent over her table in the quiet corner of the library, her heart thudding too loud for the hush around them. "What are you doing?" she demanded, voice low but trembling. Draco's mouth twisted in that same smirk he used to wear in 5th year, but it didn't reach his eyes now. The smirk was brittle, forced, like something borrowed from his past. Just seeing if the Gryffindor hero keeps her wand in hand even when she's alone. Her breath hitched. "Give it back." He didn't. He turned it in his hand, studying the familiar vine-carved wood as though it offended him. "You know, Granger, there's a spell I used to think about. One that'd make someone forget they ever pitied me. I wonder if it would work on you." Something dark flickered in his eyes. Anger, shame, exhaustion, all tangled together. Hermione took a step closer, her voice quiet but steady. "You don't have to prove anything, Draco." That name, spoken softly, without venom, caught him off guard. His fingers tightened around her wand. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might throw it back to her. But then pride, that old familiar poison, surged again. "Don't tell me what I have to do," he hissed. The spell he muttered next was fast, harsh, wrong. Hermione recognized the tone instantly, something half-formed, half-remembered from old defense texts. Her wand pulsed in his grasp, reacting violently to the conflicting intent. A flash of light burst between them, raw, uncontrolled, brilliant as lightning, throwing both of them back. Hermione hit the floor hard, books scattering around her. When the glow faded, the library was silent again, the air heavy with the scent of ozone and dust. Draco sat slumped against a bookshelf, clutching her wand. His hand trembled. The tip of the wand still glowed faintly, pulsing once, twice, then dimming. "Merlin," he whispered hoarsely. What did I just—" Hermione pushed herself up, wincing. "You idiot! That wasn't just a memory charm. You mixed the incantations." But her words cut off abruptly. Draco had gone still. His grey eyes, wide and unfocused, locked onto her face. And then, impossibly, he flinched. He saw it. A flicker of something that wasn't his. A flash of warmth, a quicksilver image that seared through his mind. Her hand brushing his arm in potions class years ago, her pulse quick beneath her sleeve, the whisper of a thought she'd never spoken aloud. He's not what he pretends to be. He jerked as if struck. What? What was that? Hermione froze, every nerve on edge. "What did you see?" "Nothing," he said too fast. He staggered to his feet, breathing hard, confusion shadowing his expression. I have to go." But when he tried to set the wand down, his hand refused to let go. The wood clung to his palm, stubbornly alive, a faint hum connecting skin to core. Hermione's stomach dropped. "You can't release it?" He shook his head, panic flickering for just a second before he crushed it beneath old habits of control. "No, it's like It's bound. She reached out instinctively, her hand brushing his. The moment their fingers met, both of them gasped, because there it was again, that strange echo, a flicker of feeling that wasn't theirs alone. She felt his fear, his exhaustion, the raw ache of guilt that lived behind his arrogance. And he caught a glimpse of her too, the relentless strength, the fatigue behind her steady eyes, the faint, painful hope that he might not be beyond redemption. They pulled apart at once. "What did you do to me?" she whispered. Draco's voice was hollow. "I don't know." For a long time, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer just awkward. It was alive, vibrating with the weight of something new. Finally, Hermione straightened, brushing dust from her robes. "We're going to Professor McGonagall." "No," he snapped. "You think I'll walk into her office and say I accidentally cursed myself with the Gryffindor princess's wand? I'd be expelled before I finish the sentence." "Then what do you suggest?" He hesitated, eyes darting to the wand still trapped in his hand. "We fix it. Ourselves." Hermione folded her arms. "You think I'll trust you after this?" His lips thinned, but there was something fragile beneath his defiance now. "You'll have to. Unless you like the idea of me wandering around seeing pieces of your thoughts." She went pale. "You can't." But he already knew. The moment her fear spiked, he felt it, saw it, tiny flashes of memory. Her sitting by the lake, clutching a book. Her whispering Harry's name after the final battle. Her sleepless nights full of half-healed scars and heavy questions. He tore his gaze away, swallowing hard. "I didn't mean to." "I know," she said quietly. He blinked. "You believe me?" "No," Hermione said, voice trembling. "But I want to." The admission hung between them, soft and dangerous. Draco finally released a shaky breath. "Then we'll figure this out, Granger, before it drives us both mad." As they left the library, her steps quick, his uneven, the faint hum between them pulsed again, like a heartbeat neither could silence. And though neither said it, both felt the same terrifying truth. Something had bound them, something deeper than magic. Hermione didn't sleep that night. The spell's afterglow still hummed faintly at the edge of her senses, a vibration that wasn't quite sound, but something felt, like an invisible thread tugging gently from somewhere across the castle. Every time she closed her eyes, the connection stirred, flashes of emotion that weren't hers, sensations out of rhythm with her own heartbeat. Guilt, restlessness, that hollow ache of someone trying too hard not to remember. Draco Malfoy. She sat up in bed, clutching the sheets, and cursed under her breath. This couldn't be happening. There were logical explanations for everything, magical or otherwise, but logic failed when she could feel a stranger's heartbeat like it pulsed beneath her own skin. Across the castle, in the Slytherin dormitory, Draco was just as sleepless. He sat on his bed, wand still within reach, watching the faint shimmer that lingered around its handle. Her wand, the very thing he'd stolen in a moment of childish spite, and now it refused to leave him. He'd tried every unbinding charm he knew, even whispered apologies into the dark, as though the wood might forgive him. Nothing. And worse, every time he tried to focus, her thoughts slipped through. Faint impressions, images blurred by distance, but real enough to rattle him. A page turning, ink smudging on parchment. A half-formed thought about responsibility that was so distinctly Granger it made him groan and press his palms into his eyes. "Brilliant," he muttered to the empty room. bound to the girl who probably dreams in footnotes. He didn't tell anyone. How could he? The other Slytherins were gone or scattered, and even if they weren't, how did one explain that he'd managed to tie himself to Hermione Granger's thoughts? By morning, both were exhausted, brittle, pretending nothing was wrong. They met again in the library, though neither had planned it. Hermione was researching binding charms, quill tapping nervously against the desk. Draco appeared at the end of the aisle, clearly debating whether to walk away. Their eyes met, and the thread between them tightened, sharply, unmistakably. He exhaled, resigned, and approached. "Have you found anything?" he asked. She didn't look up. A few possibilities, none that explain this. His tone turned defensive. "You're the brightest witch of your age, aren't you? Fix it." "Don't." Her voice was soft, but it cut through the air. "Don't use that tone. Not after what you did." He stared at her for a moment. Then something inside him cracked. "You think I don't know I made a mess of it? You think I wanted this?" Hermione looked up finally and saw something new. The cold arrogance was still there, but fractured. Beneath it, she glimpsed exhaustion, guilt, and a kind of desperation that made her throat tighten. "No," she said quietly. "I think you're terrified." Draco froze. The thread between them pulsed again, stronger this time. She could feel his reaction before he spoke. The quick flare of anger to cover fear, the instinctive need to hide. He turned away, jaw tight. Don't do that. Don't look at me like you can read me." "I don't have to," she said. "The spell does that for me." He laughed once, hollow. "Right. Perfect. The mudblood genius and the failed Death Eater sharing thoughts. It's almost poetic." The word hit her like a slap. She went still. "You don't get to say that word anymore." His eyes flickered, ashamed perhaps, but proud enough not to show it. "Force of habit. Unlearn it." He opened his mouth to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. For the first time since the war ended, Hermione Granger wasn't a symbol or an opponent. She was a person standing in front of him, trembling slightly, fierce and breakable all at once. "I'll try," he said finally, the words quiet, reluctant, but real. That surprised her enough that she forgot to breathe. And in that silence, another memory brushed across their shared link, unintentional, raw. Draco saw it as she did. Himself, standing in the great hall after Voldemort's defeat, pale and lost, his mother's hand gripping his arm. Hermione's eyes meeting his across the rubble, not in hatred, but in something almost like pity. He flinched, and the image vanished. "Stop thinking about me," he muttered, voice shaking slightly. She rose from her chair, leaning forward. "I'm not thinking about you." "Then why do I feel it?" The air between them tightened. Hermione swallowed. "Maybe because we're connected." "Maybe," Draco said softly, "because you're lying." Her breath caught. That was the danger of their bond. Every denial, every truth unspoken, echoed with more force than words ever could. They spent the next hours together, poring over dusty books, avoiding each other's gaze. Every time their fingers brushed over the same page, the link flared. Brief glimpses of thought and feeling passing between them, like whispers too intimate to be accidental. At one point, she caught a flash of his memory. Him standing before the manor fireplace, his father's shadow looming, the weight of expectation pressing against his spine. She inhaled sharply, unable to hide the jolt of sympathy. He sensed it, and recoiled. "Don't pity me." "I don't," she said. "I just understand." That seemed to unsettle him even more. When they finally gave up, the sun had sunk below the castle windows, casting long amber streaks across the floor. Hermione gathered her books, her shoulders tight. Draco lingered near the table, unwilling to speak the words twisting in his throat. As she turned to leave, he said quietly, "You shouldn't have come back to Hogwarts." She paused. "Why not?" "Because this place, people like me, it's still poison." Hermione turned, meeting his gaze. "Then maybe that's why I had to come back, to prove poison can be neutralized." For the first time he smiled, not the cruel curve of arrogance, but a small, startled thing that almost looked human. "Maybe," he said. Their eyes lingered longer than they should have, and when she finally walked away, neither of them noticed that their footsteps matched perfectly in rhythm. Their heartbeats, too. Later that night, as Hermione lay awake again, she felt it once more. That pulse in the air, the brush of another consciousness against her own. Not invasive this time, just present. Draco Malfoy, somewhere in the dark, thinking of her. And for a moment that frightened her more than any curse, she didn't push him away. By the third day, the connection had grown unpredictable, alive, as if it had moods of its own. Hermione could feel it hum faintly under her skin whenever Draco was near, an invisible vibration that sharpened her focus and blurred her composure at the same time. It wasn't painful, just constant, a quiet reminder that he was there, somewhere inside the edge of her thoughts. In Charms class, she tried to ignore it, tried to ignore him. Professor Flitwick had paired them together after some cruel twist of fate. Or perhaps, Hermione thought, because the castle itself seemed to delight in irony. Draco didn't look at her when they sat side by side at the front table, their textbooks open, wands poised. She could feel his irritation like a physical heat against her ribs. "Concentrate," Flitwick chirped, unaware of the storm brewing between them. "Synchronize your spell work. The charm will only succeed if your intentions align." Hermione almost laughed. Aligning intentions was the one thing they couldn't do. Still, she nodded curtly and raised her wand. Draco did the same, his pale fingers tense. "On 3, she said. 1, he murmured, eyes fixed on the parchment before them. 2. Their voices overlapped on the final word. 3. Twin sparks burst from their wands, collided mid-air, and fused into a single spiraling flame that refused to vanish. It hovered, twisting like smoke between them, shimmering gold and silver. Hermione's breath caught. The class gasped. Flitwick clapped, delighted, but she barely heard him. The flame pulsed once, twice, and then, as if drawn by a magnetic force, streaked downward and brushed across their joined hands. A shock went through both of them. The flame disappeared, leaving only the echo of its warmth and the faint tremor in her fingers. She dared a glance at him. Draco looked as startled as she felt. "What was that?" he muttered under his breath. Hermione's heart thudded painfully. "Our magic. Reacted. It's synchronized." "That's not supposed to happen." "No," she whispered. "It's not." They didn't speak again during class, but she caught fragments, images, sensations from him. The way his chest tightened when Flitwick praised her. The flicker of guilt when he noticed the faint bruise on her wrist from their first encounter. Every emotion carried across that unseen thread, impossible to hide. time class ended, she could barely breathe. Outside, the corridor was cold and empty. She hurried ahead, but his footsteps followed, measured, deliberate. "Granger." She stopped. Slowly, she turned. "What?" He hesitated, eyes darting away, then back again. "You felt that, didn't you?" She crossed her arms. "It's hard not to when you're practically inside my head." "Then stop thinking about me," he snapped, too defensive. Her laugh was short and humorless. "Believe me, I'm trying." Something in her tone made him falter. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them felt charged again, too close, too heavy with everything unsaid. Then, without warning, the thread pulled tight. It wasn't physical, not quite. But Hermione felt it tug from somewhere deep inside, drawing her closer to him, one step, then another, until they were standing only inches apart. She could see the quick rise and fall of his chest, the faint tremor in his jaw as he tried to hold still. "Granger," he said softly, warning and plea tangled together. Her voice came out in a whisper. "It's not me." And it wasn't. The bond had its own will, forcing them into proximity, making them feel each other's confusion, fear, curiosity, want. It broke only when someone turned the corner behind them. Hermione stepped back as if burned, and Draco exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. This can't keep happening," she said, her voice shaking. "Agreed." They stared at each other for another heartbeat, then walked in opposite directions without saying goodbye. That night, she tried again to research the binding charm. Pages blurred in front of her, the ink twisting into meaningless lines. Every theory pointed to the same conclusion. To break the spell, both participants had to reveal a truth, something they feared more than the bond itself. She closed the book, heart sinking. There were things she'd never admit to anyone, least of all him. Across the castle, Draco sat by the fire in the nearly empty Slytherin common room, the flicker of the flames painting shadows across his face. He could feel her frustration through the connection, sharp, determined, achingly familiar. And beneath it, something softer. He clenched his fists, trying to block it out. He couldn't afford to care. Not about her. Not after everything he'd done, everything he represented. But when the bond pulsed again, he saw her memory flash unbidden. Hermione, first year, hand raised eagerly in class. That same spark of certainty that had always made him sneer and secretly envy. The image vanished, but the echo of it stayed, warm and painful in equal measure. The following morning, Hermione entered the great hall half awake, clutching a mug of tea. She nearly dropped it when Draco stood from the Slytherin table and approached her. Conversations stilled. Heads turned. He ignored them all. "Granger," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "I think I found something." She blinked. "What?" "There's a record in the restricted section, a case from the 19th century. 2 wizards connected through a failed legilimency charm. They..." He hesitated, his voice dropping. "They felt what we do." Hermione's heart quickened. "And they broke it." She met his gaze, searching. "How?" He swallowed. "Together." It should have been a relief. It wasn't. The word together felt dangerous now, too loaded. "Meet me tonight," he said before she could respond. "After curfew, the library." And then he was gone, leaving her with half the great hall watching and her pulse hammering in her throat. That evening, she almost didn't go. Every rational thought told her it was foolish, reckless. But reason had stopped guiding her days ago. When she entered the library, it was empty except for the faint glow of wand light. Draco stood by the far table, shadows softening his features. He didn't look up immediately. "You came?" "Of course I did," she said, trying to sound composed. "I want this gone as much as you do." He nodded once. "Then let's start." As she drew closer, the air thickened again, charged with that same current that always seemed to find them. He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, the walls he carried around himself faltered. The spell between them pulsed once, like a heartbeat shared. And Hermione, despite every reason not to, thought, maybe it was never a mistake. The thought wasn't hers alone. She saw the shock in his eyes as he felt it too. Neither spoke again. But the silence between them was no longer hostile. It was trembling, alive, waiting for something to break it. The library had never felt so alive. Every whisper of parchment, every creak of the wooden shelves seemed to echo with something unsaid. Hermione stood on one side of the long oak table, Draco on the other, the wand light between them flickering faintly, casting thin gold lines across their faces. He had brought an old book from the restricted section, bound in blackened leather, the corners worn, the pages smelling faintly of dust and forgotten spells. "The Binding of Intents," he said, reading from the first page. His voice was steady, but his eyes flicked nervously toward her. "It says that when two wands merge through conflicting magic, the only way to undo it is for both parties to expose the intent behind their spells." Hermione frowned, scanning the faded script. "Intent?" "Why you cast it," he said. "What you wanted most when the magic was done." Her stomach tightened. "So, to end this, we have to tell the truth about what we were feeling." He met her gaze, expression unreadable. "Looks like it." For a long time, neither of them moved. The air stretched taut between them, charged, waiting. Hermione could hear the faint rhythm of her own pulse, fast and uneven, and she realized he could probably feel it too through their link. She swallowed. "Then I suppose I should go first." Draco hesitated, his hand tightening on the book. "You don't have to." "Yes," she said, more firmly than she felt. "I do." She looked down at the table, at the reflection of wand light trembling on its surface. "When I came back to Hogwarts, I told myself it was to finish my education, to prove that the world could move on. But that's not all. I came back because I couldn't stand how much I still cared. Even after the war, even after everything we lost. I wanted to believe that magic could fix something broken." Draco's eyes softened, but he said nothing. Hermione's throat tightened. "When you took my wand, I was angry, but I wasn't afraid of you, Draco. I was afraid of what I'd see in you, because somewhere in my mind, I already knew you weren't the same person anymore, and that scared me." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with understanding, with something trembling just below the surface. Draco looked away first. His voice, when he spoke, was low, almost hoarse. "My intent was worse." Hermione's chest ached. "Tell me." He forced a laugh that wasn't really laughter. "I wanted to humiliate you. For years I told myself it was because you made me feel small. But the truth is, I just wanted you to look at me, even if it was with hatred, because when you looked at me, I wasn't invisible." Her breath caught. "I thought if I could make you angry, it would feel like control," he continued, voice shaking now. "But when the spell went wrong, and I saw, What was inside your head? I didn't know what to do. You weren't supposed to feel anything except disgust. You weren't supposed to think about me at all." He closed the book gently, the sound soft as a confession. "And then I saw that you did." Hermione's heart pounded painfully. "You shouldn't have seen that." "I know," he said quietly. "But I did." The thread between them pulsed again, not as sharply this time, more like a steady rhythm, synchronizing their breaths. Hermione forced herself to speak. "So, what happens now?" He hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "The book says the spell will break once both truths are spoken aloud, but—" He trailed off, glancing at the wand still faintly glowing between them. "Maybe it doesn't want to." "Magic doesn't have wants," Hermione said automatically. "Maybe not," he replied, stepping closer. "But we do." The distance between them shrank until she could see the faint scar on his jaw, the way his pulse beat beneath the pale skin of his throat. She should have moved back. Instead, she stood still, trapped in that dangerous, breathless space where everything felt too close. "Draco," she whispered. Her name in his voice was soft, reverent. "Hermione." And for the briefest heartbeat, the air between them flickered. She felt it again, that pull, the invisible force that had once drawn them unwillingly together, now warmer, slower, deliberate. It was like their magic was breathing with them. She didn't know who moved first. 1 second they were staring, the next their hands brushed, tentative, testing, and it felt like a current rushing up her arm. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, just the nearness, the almost. Her breath hitched. "If we do this—" He shook his head slightly. "It's already happening." The thread pulsed, and suddenly the connection flared. She saw flashes not of her own memories, but his. Draco, 15, standing alone after a Quidditch loss. Draco, 17, trembling in the dark of the room of requirement, wand shaking in his hand. Draco looking at her across the great hall that night after the war, his expression raw and unguarded. Her knees went weak. Draco. "I told myself I hated you," he said, his voice low, cracked open. But it wasn't hate. It never was. The spell surged between them. Her wand, still trapped in his hand, sparked with light. Gold, then white, then something deeper, like the color of breath and heartbeat combined. The glow enveloped them both, soft but blinding. Hermione felt her chest tighten, her vision blur, and then silence. When the light faded, the wand lay harmlessly between them on the table. No hum, no pulse. The bond was gone. Hermione blinked, her ears ringing in the quiet. She should have felt relief, and she did, but it was tangled with something else, something heavier. He looked at her, eyes wide, expression unreadable. "It's over." "Yes," she said, but the word didn't feel true. He pushed the wand toward her. "It's yours." Their fingers met as she reached for it, and though the magic was gone, the warmth stayed. A heartbeat, a question. Neither moved. Then Hermione took the wand and stepped back, forcing herself to breathe. "We did it." Draco nodded once, his voice almost steady. "Right." But as she turned to leave, the silence caught them again. It was different this time, no longer charged with magic, but with choice. She hesitated at the doorway. "You said the spell broke when both truths were spoken." "It did." "Then why?" she asked quietly. "Does it still feel like something's holding us?" He didn't answer. He just looked at her with that same startled, defiant tenderness she'd seen only once before. The kind that came when someone realized they'd found what they didn't know they were searching for. And as she walked away, Hermione understood what terrified her most. The magic was gone. The feeling wasn't. The bond was gone. But the silence it left behind was almost worse. Hermione had imagined that once the magic broke, everything would return to normal. She would sleep again, study without distraction, think without that constant hum in the background. But the quiet that followed was not peace. It was absence. And absence, she realized, could be deafening. She caught herself reaching inward for the flicker of his thoughts more times than she wanted to admit. In class, she half expected to feel the pull of his attention. In the corridors, she turned her head at phantom echoes of his voice. It wasn't that she wanted him there. It was that she had grown used to his presence as something inevitable. By the end of the week, the castle felt different. Colder, perhaps, or simply lonelier. Draco was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it that he'd stopped attending meals, that he spent his nights in the astronomy tower or by the lake where the light couldn't reach him. Hermione tried not to care. Tried and failed. She lasted 3 days before she found herself walking the long, drafty staircases toward the astronomy tower after curfew. Her footsteps echoed against stone, every sound loud in the dark. The air smelled of frost and smoke. Outside, the stars hung low and bright over the forbidden forest. He was there. Of course he was. Draco stood by the balustrade, his robes open against the wind, the pale blur of his hair catching the starlight. He didn't turn as she approached, though she knew he'd heard her. "You shouldn't be here," he said without looking back. "Neither should you," she replied softly. He huffed something like laughter, breath misting in the cold. Touché. For a moment, the wind was the only sound between them. "I thought you'd gone," she said finally. "I tried," he murmured. "Packed my things. Couldn't make it past the gates." "Why?" He hesitated, then shrugged. It didn't feel finished. She stepped closer. "It isn't." That made him glance at her, his grey eyes shadowed but alive. "You think this, whatever it was, means something more?" Hermione didn't answer right away. The truth pressed against her ribs, impatient, dangerous. "I think it already does." He studied her, uncertain, as though waiting for the moment she would flinch. But she didn't. She held his gaze until the air between them grew taut again, the same invisible pull that had bound them before. Only now it was born not of magic, but of choice. "I've been trying not to think about you," he said at last. "You're doing a terrible job," she replied. That earned her a faint smile, the kind that looked like it hurt to wear. "And you, Granger? Still trying to save broken things?" She wanted to be angry, but the softness in his voice made it impossible. "Maybe," she admitted. "Or maybe I just don't like loose ends." His hand brushed the stone beside hers, not touching, but close enough that the warmth of him bled through the chill. "Then tell me what you want from me. The truth, this time." Hermione's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to ask, hadn't prepared an answer. But the words rose anyway, unfiltered, dangerous. "I want to stop pretending that I don't care what happens to you," she said. "I want to understand why it hurts that you won't let anyone in." His expression flickered. Surprise, then disbelief, then something softer. "You shouldn't care." Too late. He turned away, gripping the edge of the railing. You don't know what you're doing, Granger. You think you see something good in me, but you don't. You see what you want to see." She stepped closer until their shoulders nearly touched. "Then show me the rest." For a long moment, neither moved. The wind rose around them, cold and sharp, whipping her hair across her face. Draco's breath came quick and uneven. "Why do you keep pushing?" he asked quietly. "After everything." "Because I saw you," she said simply. "When the bond showed me your thoughts, I saw who you were underneath all that noise. You were terrified, and you still tried to do the right thing. That's more than most." He closed his eyes. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," she said, "but it's real." The silence that followed was heavy and fragile, balanced on the edge of something neither of them dared to name. When he finally turned toward her, the distance between them vanished. His voice dropped to a whisper. "What if I told you I don't know how to be better?" She reached out, barely touching the sleeve of his robe. "Then let me remind you." Her fingers brushed his wrist, a feather-light contact, but enough. Enough to make him inhale sharply, to make every wall he'd built tremble. Draco looked at her like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, torn between fear and surrender. "I can't promise you anything," he said, the words shaking slightly. "I'm not asking for promises." For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then slowly, he took her hand. His skin was cold, hers trembling. The world narrowed to the small space where they touched. "It's strange," he said after a long moment. "I used to think connection was weakness." "It isn't," she whispered. "It's the only thing that ever makes us stronger." He studied her as though memorizing every word. And in that quiet, unguarded second, something shifted. Not a spell, not magic, just the fragile beginning of understanding. The first hint of warmth returned to his eyes. Hermione let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Maybe," he said softly, "we were never meant to break the bond at all. Maybe it just changed shape." Her heart stumbled. Draco. He released her hand slowly, his thumb brushing her knuckles before letting go. "Don't say anything. Not yet." She didn't. Instead, they stood side by side, watching the stars slide across the night sky. Two people who had spent years on opposite sides of a war, bound once by accident and now by something far more dangerous: choice. When she finally left the tower, dawn was beginning to rise, the first light spilling over the edge of the forest. Down in the courtyard, she paused and looked back. Draco still stood where she'd left him, his silhouette outlined against the paling sky. For the first time since the spell had broken, Hermione didn't feel the ache of absence. She felt the pulse of something new, something alive, something that might yet become love, if they dared to let it. Hermione thought the morning after would dull everything, that distance and daylight would smother what had begun under starlight. But it didn't. The world felt sharper, more fragile, as if one careless word might break whatever thin thread now held them together. In the great hall, she caught sight of him sitting at the far end of the Slytherin table. He was pretending to read, but his posture betrayed him. Too still, too deliberate. When their eyes met, it was only for a heartbeat. But it was enough. Something unspoken passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement that what had happened in the tower had not been a dream. Harry noticed. He always noticed. "You and Malfoy," he said that afternoon, brows drawn, voice low but firm. "You've been different lately." Hermione kept her gaze on her parchment. Different how? Distracted, he said. And he's been avoiding everyone except you. I saw you together last night. Her quill stilled. You followed me. He hesitated, guilt flashing across his face. You were out after curfew. I thought maybe, after everything, you needed backup. She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. I appreciate the concern, Harry, but it's not what you think. He studied her, his eyes full of that steady, brotherly worry that she loved and resented in equal measure. Then what is it? Hermione hesitated too long. Harry leaned forward, whispering sharply. He hurt you once, Hermione. He doesn't deserve... She looked up, cutting him off with a single glance. People change. He blinked. You actually believe that? Yes, she said softly. Because if I didn't, then what was all this for? The war, the forgiveness, the rebuilding. It all means nothing if no one gets a chance to be better. Harry's mouth tightened. He didn't argue, but the silence that followed was disapproval enough. Later, when she escaped to the library, Draco was already there. Of course he was. He didn't look up as she entered, only turned a page in the book before him. Your friend cornered me in the corridor this morning, he said, his tone deliberately casual. Hermione winced. Harry? Who else? He smirked faintly. Asked me what game I was playing. Said if I so much as breathed wrong in your direction, he'd hex me into next week. He didn't. Oh, he did. I almost respected it. She rolled her eyes, but couldn't help the faint smile tugging at her lips. He means well. He always did. Draco looked up then, and the half-light caught in his eyes. You told him? No? Good. Their gazes held for a moment too long. The air around them felt thick, familiar. Not the electric pull of their magical bond, but something subtler, heavier. He broke the silence first. You're defending me now. That's new. Don't get used to it. He tilted his head. I think I already have. Hermione's heart gave an inconvenient flutter. She moved to sit opposite him, trying to ground herself in logic. We should talk about what comes next. The spell is broken, but the connection, whatever remains, still feels unpredictable. We should study it, document it. He raised an eyebrow. You want to turn us into research material? It's better than ignoring it, she said. Besides, it might help others if two people accidentally fuse their minds together because of a miscast curse, he finished dryly. Sounds common. She gave him a look, but he smiled, and something inside her softened. They spent hours reading, their silence companionable in a way that surprised her. Every so often he'd pass her a note with a half-mocking comment, and she'd answer with one of her own. The banter was sharp, effortless, the kind that danced on the edge of affection without admitting it outright. At one point, she reached for a book, and their hands brushed. Just a brief touch, but it sent a ripple through her chest. When she glanced up, his gaze was already fixed on her. Neither of them moved. She felt the air shift, and then, as if the castle itself sensed the danger, the clock in the hallway struck 6, breaking the moment. She withdrew her hand. We should go. He nodded, though his expression was unreadable. Granger. Yes? Don't let Potter talk you out of this. She frowned. Out of what? Whatever this is. He gestured vaguely between them. Whatever it's becoming. Her heart stuttered. I haven't decided what that is yet. He smiled faintly. Then decide carefully. That night, Hermione dreamed of water. of standing at the edge of the black lake, while a reflection she didn't recognize stared back. Behind her, a shadow approached, and when she turned, she saw Draco. He held out her wand, glowing softly between them, and whispered, "You already know how this ends." She woke with a start, breath unsteady. The next day brought more whispers. Hogwarts had always thrived on rumour, and now the corridors buzzed with speculation. Malfoy seen walking with Granger, Granger defending Malfoy to McGonagall, the two of them caught exchanging looks in charms. None of it confirmed, none of it denied. By evening, even she couldn't ignore the tension pressing in from every side. She found him again by the lake, standing at the water's edge where the moonlight broke into silver shards across the surface. The wind lifted his hair, softening the sharpness of his profile. "You're making it very hard to avoid you," she said quietly. "Good." Hermione crossed her arms, but her tone betrayed her amusement. "You realize this is reckless." "I've done reckless before," he said, glancing at her. "It's the only thing I've ever been good at." She shook her head, smiling despite herself. "That's not true." "No." "You're good at pretending you don't care," she said. "But you do, more than you'll admit." His expression changed, something raw flickering through it. "And you? What are you pretending?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. The air between them was thick again, shimmering with everything left unsaid. Finally, she stepped closer. "This isn't supposed to happen." "Then tell me to stop." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Draco's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a moment she thought he might close the distance. But instead, he reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering just a second too long. "You won't," he said quietly. The world narrowed to the sound of their breathing, to the slow rhythm that seemed to pull them closer no matter how much they resisted. When he finally stepped back, it was with visible effort. "I don't know what this is, Granger," he said, voice rough. "But it's not over." Hermione exhaled, her pulse still racing. "I know." He turned to leave, his silhouette fading into the silver light. She watched him go, heart twisting with something she couldn't name. Because deep down, she knew he was right. Whatever had begun between them, it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Rain fell over Hogwarts the next morning, steady, relentless, soaking the stone corridors and the students' mood alike. Hermione usually loved the smell of wet parchment and earth after a storm, but today it felt heavy, suffocating. Every drop seemed to echo a thought she couldn't silence. She hadn't seen Draco since the night by the lake. Every time she turned a corner, part of her expected him to be there, leaning against a wall with that infuriating half-smile. And every time he wasn't, something in her chest tightened. It was ridiculous, dangerous, and yet she couldn't stop. In the library, she sat pretending to read while her mind replayed their last conversation. "Tell me to stop." He had said it so simply, as if it were that easy. But it wasn't. She had fought dark wizards and stood before death itself, yet somehow the hardest battle was this. Telling herself that she didn't want him to reach for her again. The sound of footsteps behind her made her look up. Draco. He was dripping from the rain, his hair darker from the water, his expression unreadable. Without asking, he sat down across from her. The quiet between them stretched, broken only by the occasional whisper of pages turning. "You're avoiding me," she said finally. He arched an eyebrow. "I thought that's what you wanted." I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Hermione sighed, closing her book. This isn't working. He leaned back in his chair. What isn't? Whatever this is, every time I think it's settled, you... Show up! He smirked faintly. You say that like you don't want me to. Her cheeks flushed. Don't twist my words. I don't have to, he said softly. They twist themselves. The rain hammered harder against the windows. Hermione stood abruptly. You're impossible. Draco rose too, his eyes following her as she turned to leave. You're walking away again. Because every time I stay, you make it harder to think. He caught her wrist before she could step past him. The touch was light but electric. The warmth of his skin against hers sent a shock through her body. Then don't think, he said quietly. For once in your life, Granger, stop trying to make sense of everything. Hermione's breath caught. And what if I can't? He took a step closer, the space between them vanishing. Then let me try for you. She wanted to pull back, but her body betrayed her. His hand slid slowly down her arm before he let go, leaving her skin tingling. Why do you keep doing this? She whispered. His answer came without hesitation. Because you make me feel like I still have a chance to be someone else. That broke her. The anger, the fear, the years of suspicion, all of it cracked under the raw honesty in his voice. Before she could stop herself, she said, "And what if I want to believe that too?" The look he gave her then was pure devastation disguised as hope. A loud bang interrupted them. The door to the library flew open, and two younger students stumbled in, arguing over a spilled ink bottle. The spell broke. Hermione stepped back. "We can't do this here." He nodded, jaw tight. "Meet me tonight, the room of requirement." She hesitated only a second before nodding. "All right." That night, the castle was quiet. Most students were asleep, the corridors dimly lit by the occasional torch. Hermione's footsteps echoed softly as she walked, her heart racing. When she reached the blank stretch of wall on the 7th floor, the door appeared instantly, as if it had been waiting for her. Draco stood inside. The room had shaped itself into something simple. Tall windows, a faint fire, and shelves of unused books. He didn't speak at first, only watched as she entered. There was something almost fragile about the way he stood there, his usual sharpness replaced by hesitation. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "Neither was I." For a moment, they just looked at each other. The firelight caught in his hair, in her eyes, painting the air between them golden shadow. "I don't know how to do this," Hermione admitted. He stepped closer. "Neither do I, but I know what I want to try." Her voice shook. "Draco." "Don't," he murmured. "Don't say my name like it's something to be afraid of." The way he said it made her heart twist. Slowly, carefully, he reached for her hand again. This time, she didn't pull away. Their fingers laced, tentative but sure. It felt like something inevitable. For a long while, they just stood like that, not speaking, not moving, only breathing in the same rhythm. She could feel the heat of the fire on her back, the cool of his hand in hers. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Every time I thought about you, I told myself it was just guilt, that I owed you something. But it isn't that, is it?" "No," she whispered. "It isn't." He exhaled shakily, as though releasing years of denial in a single breath. "You were always there, even when I didn't want to see it." Hermione's throat tightened. and you were the one person I swore I'd never forgive. But you did. I'm trying to." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe I can learn to forgive myself too." The words hung between them, soft and dangerous. Hermione lifted her gaze, and for once she didn't look away. The room seemed to fade, the shelves, the fire, the walls, until there was nothing but him. Their foreheads brushed, light as breath. And though neither dared to move closer, the air trembled with the weight of everything they didn't say. When she finally stepped back, her voice was unsteady. "We should go before someone finds us." He nodded, though his eyes stayed on hers. "Hermione." "Yes. Tomorrow everything might be different, but tonight, thank you." "For what?" "For not running this time." She didn't trust herself to speak. She only turned, pausing at the doorway long enough to glance back. Draco stood where she'd left him, framed by firelight and shadow. His expression held something she'd never thought she'd see in him. Hope without arrogance, want without cruelty. When she finally walked away, her heart was beating too fast to count. The castle's corridors stretched endlessly before her, but for the first time, they didn't feel lonely. Something had changed. Not a spell, not an accident, something real. And deep down, Hermione knew the truth she couldn't yet say aloud. This wasn't just a connection born of magic. This was the beginning of love. The following week passed like a secret held between two people who couldn't stop glancing at each other. Every corridor in Hogwarts seemed smaller now, every shared silence louder. Hermione found herself mapping his movements without meaning to. The way he lingered after class, the places he avoided, the rare moments when their paths crossed, and the air grew taut with something unspoken. The room of requirement had changed everything. Or perhaps it had simply revealed what had been there all along. They hadn't kissed. They hadn't even said the words that hovered constantly between them. But it didn't matter. That night had left its mark. And now, every time their eyes met, it was as if the castle itself held its breath. Hermione told herself she was being careful, that she was guarding her heart, keeping things rational. But reason dissolved too easily when it came to Draco. He was trying. She saw that. The cruel edge in his voice had softened, the defensive mask cracked in places. Sometimes, when he didn't know she was watching, he looked almost peaceful. Almost. The peace never lasted long. There were still whispers in the corridors. Granger and Malfoy together? She must have lost her mind. He's using her. Hermione ignored them until she couldn't. One afternoon, as she left the library, two sixth-year Ravenclaws stopped talking when she passed. She caught only a fragment. Can't believe she'd stoop to. She spun on her heel. To what exactly? They froze, faces pale. "Go on," Hermione said coolly. "Say it." But before they could, a familiar voice came from behind her. "Say it, and I'll hex you so hard you'll wake up speaking Parseltongue." Draco. He stepped between them, calm but dangerous, his presence filling the hallway like a storm about to break. The Ravenclaws stammered apologies and fled. When they were gone, Hermione folded her arms. "That wasn't necessary." "It was," he said. "You shouldn't have to fight their battles for them." "They weren't fighting me," she retorted. "They were being childish, and you can't keep doing that, jumping in like you're my protector." He met her gaze, something raw flickering beneath his restraint. "Maybe I want to be." The words hung in the air, sharp and intimate. Hermione blinked, thrown off balance. "You're not helping yourself. People already—" "I don't care what they think," he interrupted. "Not anymore." "Well, I do," she said quietly. "Because I've spent my life proving people wrong, and I won't have that undone by rumors about who I talk to after class." He flinched, the meaning clear. "I didn't mean—" she began, but he cut her off with a small, bitter smile. "Yes, you did." Her throat tightened. "Draco, don't," he said, stepping back. "You've made your point." And then he was gone, leaving her in the echo of her own heartbeat. For 2 days, he avoided her. No glances in class, no notes passed under books, no quiet presence in the library. Hermione tried to focus on her studies, but the absence pressed against her like a bruise. She hadn't realized how much she'd grown used to his nearness, the way he made the world quieter somehow, even when he was infuriating. On the 3rd night, she found herself standing outside the Slytherin common room. She hesitated. This was madness. But she couldn't leave it like this. The entrance was guarded by a portrait of a stern-looking serpent coiled around a silver chalice. When she whispered the password, one she'd overheard him use weeks ago, the walls slid open with a sigh. The common room was empty except for Draco, sitting by the fire with a book on his lap he clearly wasn't reading. He looked up, startled. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she said, echoing his words from the tower. His expression shifted, the faintest ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. "You remembered." "I remember too much," she said, "especially when people walk away without letting me explain." He set the book aside. "Then explain." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I didn't mean what I said about the rumors. I just wanted to protect yourself," he finished quietly. "You always do." "Yes," she admitted, "because it's easier than admitting I care." Draco went still. The firelight painted his face in golden shadow. "Care?" Hermione's voice dropped to a whisper. "About you." The words seemed to change the air itself. He stood, slow and deliberate, as if afraid to break the fragile truth between them. "Say it again." "Don't make me. I need to hear it." Her heart pounded. "I care about you." The smallest sound escaped him, half laugh, half breath, and then he closed the distance between them. "Granger," he murmured, voice trembling in a way she'd never heard before. "If you keep saying things like that, I won't be able to stop myself. Maybe I don't want you to." The fire crackled softly. And then, finally, he kissed her. It wasn't the desperate collision she'd imagined. It was slow, hesitant, a question rather than a claim. His hand brushed her jaw, his lips tentative at first, then certain when she didn't pull away. The world fell away until there was only the warmth of his mouth, the taste of smoke and rain, and the quiet exhale that wasn't hers. When they broke apart, both were shaking. "That was," he began. "A mistake," she finished, though her voice betrayed her. He searched her face, eyes fierce and uncertain. "No, it was inevitable." Hermione swallowed hard, feeling her pulse race. "We can't. We already did." She let out a trembling laugh, part disbelief, part relief. "You make everything complicated." He smiled faintly. "And you make complication look worth it." They stood in silence for a while, the firelight dancing between them. Finally, Hermione whispered, "What now?" Draco's expression softened. "Now, we see if what's between us can survive the morning." Her breath caught. "And if it doesn't, then we start over," he said. "Because I'm done running from you, Hermione." She met his gaze, and in it she saw the truth she'd always feared and hoped for, the one that made her heart ache and steady all at once. There was no magic binding them now, only choice. And as she left the Slytherin common room, her lips still tingling from his kiss, Hermione knew that everything had changed again. Not by accident this time, by intention. Morning came with fog, thick, grey, heavy. It wrapped around the castle like a secret. Hermione sat in the great hall long after breakfast had ended, stirring her tea though it had gone cold. Her thoughts refused to settle. Every sip brought back the warmth of Draco's mouth, the echo of his words. "Now we see if what's between us can survive the morning." She wanted to tell herself it had been a mistake, that it was just a lapse, born of exhaustion and emotion. But the memory of his touch lingered with terrifying clarity. There had been nothing confused about it. Not the way he'd looked at her, not the way her heart had leapt when he said her name. Across the hall, a familiar voice broke through her thoughts. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Harry slid into the seat beside her, concern shadowing his expression. "I'm fine," she said too quickly. "You're not fine. You've barely eaten and you've been staring at the same teacup for 10 minutes. Hermione forced a smile. "You're exaggerating." "I'm not," he said quietly. "And you've been avoiding me." She sighed. "Harry, did something happen?" His tone softened, but his eyes were sharp. "With Malfoy?" Her pulse stumbled. "Hermione," he pressed, "I saw you leaving the dungeons last night." She froze. Harry exhaled slowly, as though the truth had confirmed itself. "You don't have to explain. Just be careful. He's not like us." She flinched at the words. "Not like us. You know what I mean." "No," she said, voice trembling. "I don't. Because if you mean he's not a Gryffindor or not one of your people, then you're wrong. He's as human as any of us." Harry's jaw tightened. "After everything he's done?" "Yes," she whispered. "Especially after everything." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he stood, shaking his head. "Just don't let him hurt you, Hermione. You deserve better than ghosts." When he walked away, the silence he left behind felt heavier than before. By afternoon, the fog had thickened outside, the castle swallowed in white. Hermione found herself climbing toward the North Tower, where she knew Draco often went to be alone. The stairwell was cold, the stone damp beneath her hand. He was there. Of course he was, leaning against the window, looking out over the mist. His reflection in the glass was pale, distant, almost fragile. "Are you hiding from me now?" she asked softly. He turned, the faintest hint of surprise in his eyes. "I thought you might need space." "I don't." He studied her, uncertain. "Potter spoke to me this morning." Her stomach dropped. "What did he say?" "Exactly what I expected." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That I'm poison, that you should stay away. And you're listening to him." "Should I?" She stepped closer, close enough to see the faint bruise on his wrist from where she'd gripped him too hard the night before. "Do you want me to?" He hesitated. "I don't know what I want anymore." "Yes, you do," she said quietly. "You just don't think you deserve it." Something flickered behind his eyes. Anger, fear, longing. "And what if I don't?" "Then I'll decide that for you." The words left her before she could stop them, reckless and certain. Draco's breath caught. "Hermione!" "Stop thinking," she said, echoing his own command from days ago. "Just feel." When he reached for her, it wasn't the same as before. There was hesitation, but also hunger, something that felt like surrender. She rose on her toes and kissed him first this time. Not softly, not cautiously, but with the weight of everything they'd both denied. He responded instantly, one hand sliding to her back, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, raw and desperate, tasting of rain and forgiveness. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the castle, the war, the eyes of the world. There was only the warmth of him, the tremor of his breath against hers. When they broke apart, the world felt strangely quiet. "That," he murmured, "is going to make things very complicated." "They already are." He smiled faintly. "You're impossible." "So, you've told me." He brushed a thumb over her cheek, his gaze soft. "What are we doing, Hermione?" "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I don't want to stop." He leaned his forehead against hers. "Then we won't." The days that followed blurred into something surreal. They moved like conspirators through the castle, always just out of sight. Stolen moments in forgotten hallways, whispered conversations in the corners of classrooms, fingers brushing beneath tables. Every meeting carried the same rhythm, a heartbeat of closeness, a rush of fear, a retreat before anyone could see. It should have felt wrong, but it didn't. It felt inevitable, as if all the years of hatred had only been preparation for this dangerous tenderness. Yet Hermione knew it couldn't last. Secrets never stayed buried long at Hogwarts. One evening, as she left the library, she found a folded note tucked into her bag. No signature. Just a few words written in elegant script. "You think no one sees you, but everyone does." Her heart pounded. She looked around, but the corridor was empty. She went straight to Draco. He read the note once, his face tightening. "Who could have written it?" she asked. He crumpled the parchment in his hand. "Too many people." Fear prickled down her spine. What if it gets to McGonagall, or the Prophet? His jaw clenched. "Let them talk." "Draco," I said, "let them." His tone cracked on the word, and he turned away, fists trembling at his sides. "I spent half my life trying to make people believe I was untouchable. It never saved me. I'm done living like I owe the world an explanation." Hermione stepped forward, laying a hand on his arm. "Then don't face it alone." He looked down at her, eyes fierce, almost pleading. "You don't understand what they'll say." "Yes, I do. They'll call me a fool. They'll call you worse." "Doesn't that bother you?" "It used to." The silence that followed was electric, a mixture of fear and defiance. Finally, he said, voice low, "You'll regret this." "Then I'll regret it with you." His breath caught, and for a moment, something like peace crossed his face. He pulled her closer, holding her as though anchoring himself to the only thing left that felt real. Outside, thunder rolled over the castle, shaking the windows. Inside, Hermione closed her eyes against his shoulder, knowing this fragile, impossible thing between them was no longer something she could walk away from. It was too dangerous, too consuming, too real. The storm that had rolled in over the castle stayed for days, thunder curling against the mountains, rain whispering against the glass. The world outside seemed to match the one within Hermione. Restless, unpredictable, charged with something that felt both exhilarating and dangerous. The note in her pocket was a constant reminder. You think no one sees you, but everyone does. Someone knew. Someone was watching. She tried to convince herself it didn't matter, that what was happening between her and Draco was nobody's business but theirs. But Hogwarts was a world built on whispers, and secrets spread faster than spells. By Thursday, the rumors had changed shape. No longer speculation, but certainty. A Gryffindor prefect had seen them near the North Tower. A Hufflepuff claimed to have caught them in the library after hours. The lies were embellished, retold, distorted, until even Hermione began to lose track of what had actually happened and what the castle had invented. Draco met her outside the charms corridor after class, his expression tight. They're talking again. I know. I can handle it, he said, his voice low, almost defiant. But you shouldn't have to. She folded her arms. You think I care what they say? You should. Why? She demanded. Because I'm supposed to care about what people think of you? Of us? Because they'll hurt you to get to me, he snapped, and the flash of anger in his voice made her flinch. Draco. He shook his head, stepping back. You don't understand how they see me. You never will. Her voice softened. Then show me. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Not here. He led her down the quiet corridors that twisted beneath the castle. Old dungeons, long abandoned since the war. The air grew colder, the torches dimmer. At last, he stopped before a heavy wooden door and pushed it open. Inside was a small, empty chamber. Dust hung in the air like memory. This, he said quietly, is where I took my mark. Hermione froze. Draco's face was unreadable as he stepped further inside. My father thought it was poetic, that I should take my vows in the same room where generations of Malfoys had pledged themselves to power. I was 16. I didn't understand what it meant. I thought I was choosing strength. He turned toward her, eyes shadowed but steady. You wanted to see how they see me? This is it. The coward who stood in this room and didn't say no. Hermione's throat ached. You were a child. I was a Malfoy, he said simply. That was enough. She moved closer, her voice trembling. You can't keep defining yourself by what you were forced to do. And what should I call myself instead? Someone trying to be better, she said. Someone who already is. He laughed once, not cruelly, but with disbelief. You say that like you believe it. I do. He stared at her, something raw breaking behind his eyes. Then you're a bigger fool than I thought. Before she could respond, he turned away sharply, pacing to the far wall. His voice was tight when he spoke again. You think this ends with people forgiving me because I kissed a Gryffindor? They'll never see me the way you do. Maybe they don't have to, she said softly. He looked at her then, and the despair in his expression was almost unbearable. Why do you keep fighting for me? Because you don't know how to fight for yourself. He closed his eyes as if her words physically hurt him. Then, before she could move, he crossed the room in 2 strides and kissed her. It wasn't gentle this time. It was desperate, angry, a confession wrapped in fire. Hermione's hands rose to his chest, gripping his robes as though steadying herself against a storm. The kiss deepened, full of everything neither dared to say. Fear, regret, longing, hope. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Don't, she whispered. Don't keep running from this. He pressed his forehead against hers. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. The silence that followed was fragile, trembling. Then he said quietly, "If you stay, they'll destroy you. Then let them try." Her defiance stunned him into stillness. For a long moment, he just looked at her, as though seeing her for the first time. Not the girl who had bested him in every class, not the war hero everyone expected her to be, but someone choosing him, freely and without apology. He lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You don't make sense." "Neither does this," she said, "but it's real." He smiled then, small, fleeting, but real. "You're going to ruin my reputation." "Too late," she murmured, and kissed him again. By the time they left the chamber, the castle was asleep. The storm outside had passed, leaving the air sharp and still. They walked in silence until they reached the main staircase. There, Draco stopped. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Be seen with you. Pretend I don't care when people stare." Hermione's eyes softened. "Then don't pretend." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," she said, "but it's worth it." They stood there for a while, the torches flickering above them. When she finally turned to go, he caught her hand. "You're not alone in this, you know," he said. She smiled faintly. "Neither are you." He let go slowly, as if afraid she'd disappear if he blinked. And when Hermione climbed the stairs, she felt lighter than she had in weeks, even knowing the storm had only shifted, not ended. Because for the first time since the war, she wasn't fighting a battle out of duty or guilt. She was fighting for something she wanted, for someone she loved. The gossip reached its peak by the end of the month. What had begun as whispers had grown into certainty, fuel for every corridor conversation, every passing glance. Granger and Malfoy had become a phrase whispered like a scandalous spell. Some people said it with disgust, others with fascination. Hermione tried not to care. She walked through the halls with her chin high, her steps steady, pretending the murmurs didn't sting. But they did. Every time she heard her name coupled with his, the words seemed to chip away at the fragile safety they had built. Draco bore it differently. He ignored them, outwardly calm, but there was tension in the way his jaw set, in the way his eyes hardened when someone stared too long. One morning, when she found him in the courtyard, he was standing over a shattered piece of parchment, his knuckles white. "What happened?" she asked. He hesitated. "Someone sent me a letter." She picked up a fragment. The writing was jagged, the ink blotted as though pressed by a furious hand. Only one sentence remained legible. "You'll never deserve her." Hermione's heart sank. "Draco!" He shook his head, voice cold but cracking at the edges. "I've read worse. That doesn't make it right." He gave a bitter laugh. "It's Hogwarts. It's never been right." "Then let's fix it," she said. "Together." He looked up at her sharply. "And how do you propose we do that? Publicly declare whatever this is and let them tear us apart faster?" "If we hide, we're letting them win," she said quietly. "We're letting them decide what we are." "What we are," he repeated, the words soft but sharp, "is impossible." She took a step closer. "Then why are you still here?" His composure faltered. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, in a low voice that felt too honest, he said, "Because I don't know how to stop wanting you." The confession struck like lightning. The courtyard went silent, except for the rain dripping from the gargoyles. Hermione's breath caught. She reached for his hand before she could stop herself. He didn't pull away. For a moment they stood there, two figures in the grey light, bound by defiance and fear and something that had already gone too far to undo. But before either could speak, a voice echoed from the archway. "Well," said a drawling tone Hermione hadn't heard in months. "Isn't this poetic?" She turned and her stomach dropped. Pansy Parkinson. Her dark eyes glittered with cruel amusement as she stepped closer, arms folded. "Granger and Malfoy. I thought the rumors were pathetic lies, but it seems even gossip underestimated you." "Go away, Pansy," Draco said, his tone low and dangerous. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of it." Pansy's smile sharpened. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? The Golden Girl and the disgraced heir? Honestly, I'm almost impressed." Hermione clenched her fists. "Say what you want about me, but leave him out of it." "Oh, I'll say plenty about him," Pansy said, stepping closer. "Do you think I don't know how this ends? He destroys everything he touches. He always has." "Enough," Draco snapped, but his voice broke on the word. Hermione turned to him, seeing the tension in his jaw, the flicker of shame in his eyes. Pansy saw it too, and smiled like a predator who'd found blood. "You really thought you could outrun what you are, didn't you?" she said softly. "You can't, Draco." And Pansy's eyes flicked to Hermione. "She'll realize that soon enough." Hermione's hand found Draco's, firm and sure. "You're wrong," she said. The conviction in her voice silenced even Pansy for a heartbeat. Draco squeezed her hand once, grounding himself, then spoke with quiet venom. "Get out, Pansy, before I forget I ever pitied you." Her smile faltered. Then, with a sharp toss of her hair, she turned and stalked away, her footsteps echoing like closing doors. When she was gone, Hermione exhaled shakily. "Are you all right?" Draco laughed under his breath, a sound that wasn't amusement but exhaustion. "I should be used to it by now." "You shouldn't have to be." He looked at her, eyes tired but softening. "You keep saying that, as if you can undo years of this." "Maybe I can't," she said, "but I can stand beside you while you try." For the first time that day, he smiled. Small, tentative, but real. They didn't speak of the incident again, but it lingered. That night, Hermione couldn't sleep. The castle was too quiet, her mind too loud. She slipped out of bed and found herself drawn to the astronomy tower. Draco was there, of course. He always seemed to be where she went when she needed him most. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked without turning. "No," she said. "You either." "Habit," he murmured. "I used to come here to think. Now I come here to stop thinking." She joined him at the railing. The night stretched endlessly below them, the forbidden forest shrouded in mist. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Regret what?" "Us." He was silent for a long time. Then, "No, I regret everything else that made it this hard." Her heart twisted. "Sometimes I think we're both still trying to forgive ourselves." "Maybe that's why it works," he said quietly. "Because you see the part of me I can't." She turned toward him. "You make me see the part of me I forget to forgive." Draco's expression softened. "You always find a way to ruin my carefully built walls. You know that?" "Someone has to." He smiled, and for a moment, the tension that had shadowed them for weeks lifted. He leaned forward, brushing a kiss against her forehead, gentle, reverent, fleeting. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "let them talk." And if they do, then we'll give them something worth talking about. The next morning, they walked into the great hall together. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Forks froze midway to mouths. The silence was sharp enough to cut. Hermione felt her heart pound, but Draco's hand brushed hers beneath the table, brief, reassuring. McGonagall's gaze caught them from the staff table, sharp but not unkind. She didn't say a word. Harry's eyes widened from across the hall. Ron's mouth opened slightly, but neither spoke. For once, Hermione didn't explain, didn't defend. She simply sat beside Draco, lifted her chin, and started to eat. The whispers started again, of course. They always would. But she felt the difference now. It no longer mattered. Because when Draco turned to her, the smallest smile tugging at his lips, she realized that the war wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about daring to be happy, even when the world said you shouldn't be. And for the first time, happiness didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like peace. Spring crept back into Hogwarts like a promise half remembered. The snow melted into glittering streams that whispered through the courtyards, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth and blooming lilacs. Yet for Hermione, the calm outside did not match the storm within. Every day with Draco felt like walking a tightrope between wonder and ruin. He could make her laugh with one dry remark, disarm her with one rare smile, and then, just as quickly, retreat behind the shadows of his past. She never knew which version of him she would meet, but she had stopped pretending she could stay away. The morning sunlight spilled across the great hall when a letter arrived for her. Official parchment sealed with the crest of the ministry. She broke it open and froze. "What is it?" Harry asked from across the table. She hesitated. "It's from Kingsley. They're asking me to come in for an evaluation, potential placement in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement." Harry grinned. "That's incredible. You've been talking about this for years." Hermione smiled faintly. "Yes, years ago." He frowned. "You don't sound excited." She folded the letter carefully, avoiding his gaze. "It's complicated." Harry's expression shifted as understanding dawned. "Because of him." She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Hermione," he said quietly, "this is your future. Don't let Malfoy—" "Stop," she interrupted, sharper than intended. "He's not making my choices for me." "Then make them for yourself," Harry said, standing. "Because the rest of the world is moving on. You should, too." His words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they carried truth. Later, when she found Draco in the library, she didn't know how to tell him. He was bent over a table, sketching runes in a notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. The quiet intensity of him, focused, disciplined, always disarmed her more than any charm. "You look like you're trying to invent a new language," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Maybe I am. One that makes sense of all this." She smiled despite herself. "You'll have to teach me when you finish." At her voice, his expression softened. "You'd probably learn it faster than I could invent it." She hesitated, then set the letter on the table between them. "The ministry wants me in London next month, a permanent post." Draco went still. His eyes flicked to the parchment, then back to her. "And I haven't decided." "Why not?" "Because it would mean leaving." He exhaled slowly. "That's what people do, Hermione. They leave Hogwarts. They start over." "I'm not sure I want to start over without you." The honesty of it silenced them both. Finally, Draco leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. You can't build your life around someone who's still learning how to stand on his own. You think that's what I'm doing? I think, he said quietly, you've spent your whole life saving people, and maybe it's time you saved yourself. The words landed like a curse she didn't know how to counter. So, you're saying I should go. I'm saying you deserve a life that isn't built out of apologies for mine. Anger flared before she could stop it. You don't get to decide what I deserve. No, he said, voice breaking slightly, but I can choose not to drag you down with me. He stood, closing the notebook with finality. Go to London, Hermione. Change the world. It's what you were meant to do. She stared at him, speechless. And what about you? He smiled without warmth. I'll survive. I always do. Then he walked away, leaving the letter between them like a line neither dared to cross. The weeks that followed felt like living in a half-finished story. They saw each other in passing, in the corridors, in the library, but neither spoke. Each glance was a bruise, each silence heavier than the last. Hermione threw herself into preparations for her ministry evaluation, yet every victory felt hollow. The castle seemed emptier without him, as though his absence had drained the colour from the walls. Then, one night, an owl arrived, a small scrap of parchment tied to its leg in Draco's handwriting. Meet me at midnight. The lake. She didn't hesitate. The night was cold, the moon low. When she reached the lake, Draco was standing near the water's edge, his reflection rippling beneath the stars. You came, he said quietly. Of course I did. He turned to face her, and she saw it. The exhaustion, the conflict, the flicker of something like hope. I shouldn't have said those things, he admitted. About leaving, about us. Hermione stepped closer. Then why did you? Because I thought it would make it easier for you. It didn't. He gave a short, humorless laugh. No, it didn't for me either. They stood in silence, the wind rustling the reeds. Finally, he said, Do you ever wonder what we might have been if things had been different? If there'd been no war, no hatred between our names? I used to, she said softly. But then I realized wishing for a different past means denying who we are now. And I don't want to erase that, not even the painful parts. Draco's gaze met hers, steady and unguarded. You always find the right words. Only because you make me need them. He took a hesitant step forward. What if I asked you to stay? Her breath caught. Would you mean it? He nodded once. Yes. Hermione's throat tightened. Then you'd have to promise me something. Anything. That you'd stop surviving, she said, and start living. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he reached out, taking her hand as if testing whether it was real. His fingers were cold, trembling slightly, but the touch was certain. I can try, he whispered. She smiled through the tears she hadn't realized were falling. Then maybe I'll stay. The air between them shimmered. No magic, just the quiet pull of two people choosing each other despite everything. He leaned in, their foreheads touching, the lake reflecting the pale glow of moonlight around them. This doesn't have to be forever, she said, but it's ours now. That's enough. He nodded, his voice barely audible. It's more than I ever thought I'd get. The wind stirred, carrying away the last traces of winter. And for the first time in a long while, Hermione felt the world settle. Not perfectly, not easily, but truthfully. Because love, she realized, wasn't about escaping the past. It was about daring to build something in its shadow and believing it could still bloom. The last week of term arrived with sunlight, laughter, and goodbyes. The castle buzzed with energy as trunks were packed, exams finished, and parchment letters fluttered like restless birds across the great hall. Hermione sat near the window in the library, pretending to read, while her mind refused to focus on anything but the ticking of time. Tomorrow, she would leave Hogwarts. Tomorrow, everything between her and Draco would become something memory-shaped, something fragile and uncertain. She had promised herself she would go, that she would take the ministry position, continue her work, change the world like everyone expected her to. But the thought of walking through those gates and leaving him behind felt like tearing out a part of herself she hadn't realized she needed. Granger. The voice came softly from behind her, familiar enough to make her heart stutter. Draco leaned against the doorway, his robes undone, sunlight slanting across his face. He looked less like the sharp-edged boy she'd met years ago, and more like someone remade, still marked by the past, but no longer defined by it. "You're hiding again," he said, half a smile tugging at his mouth. "I'm thinking." "That's worse." She rolled her eyes, but the tension broke a little. "If I didn't think, you'd get yourself into trouble twice as fast." He stepped closer, resting his hands on the back of the chair opposite hers. "I wanted to see you before you left." Hermione's chest tightened. "You make it sound so final." "It feels final," he said quietly. She closed her book, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't want it to be." Draco's gaze flicked toward the window, where the sky gleamed blue and endless. "I don't know what happens next, Hermione. You'll be in London, and I—" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I'm still trying to figure out what I'm meant to do now that my life doesn't belong to anyone else." "You'll find it," she said softly. "You always do." He shook his head. "You have too much faith in me." "I have exactly enough." Something in his eyes changed, softer, uncertain. "You really believe that?" "Yes." The words settled between them, quiet but unshakable. He moved around the table, standing close enough that she could feel his presence in the air, warm, careful, deliberate. "Then I suppose I should believe it too." "You should." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sunlight caught dust motes drifting in the air, golden and slow. Hermione wanted to memorize everything. The way his eyes looked lighter when he smiled, the faint tremor in his hand, as if he were holding something precious he didn't know how to keep. "I used to think love was a kind of weakness," he said finally. "That caring about someone meant giving them power over you. But with you—" He trailed off, his voice barely above a whisper. "It feels like the only thing that ever made me stronger." Hermione's breath caught. "Then don't let it go." He reached out, fingers brushing her wrist. "You'll go, though. You always had somewhere greater to be." "Maybe," she said, "but that doesn't mean I'll stop coming back." He smiled faintly. "To Hogwarts?" "To you." The words seemed to undo him. His hand slipped from her wrist to her palm, their fingers threading together naturally, as though they'd been made to fit that way. "You'll ruin my reputation," he murmured, echoing a line from weeks ago. "Too late," she whispered. He laughed under his breath, but it faded quickly, replaced by something deeper. "Hermione, if I asked you to stay, would you?" She hesitated, the truth pressed against her ribs like a heartbeat. "No." she said finally, and his face fell. "But not because I don't want to. Because I need to go, to prove to myself that I can have both. The life I've dreamed of, and the person I didn't expect." Draco studied her, the sadness in his eyes edged with pride. "You always were the brave one." "And you," she said, smiling faintly, "were never as much of a coward as you pretended to be." He laughed softly, and for a moment it felt like they'd stepped outside of time. Two people standing in the fragile space between an ending and a beginning. Then he leaned forward, closing the distance. Their kiss was quiet, tender, nothing like the frantic ones before. It felt like a seal of something real, something that would last even when everything else changed. When they pulled apart, Hermione's eyes were wet. "This isn't goodbye." "No," he said. "It's just not yet." The next morning, the carriages lined up outside the castle. Students buzzed around them, laughter and shouts echoing across the courtyard. Hermione stood beside her trunk, clutching the letter from the ministry in one hand and her wand in the other. She glanced back once. Draco stood at the top of the steps, hands in his pockets, watching her. Their eyes met across the distance. No words, no promises, just understanding. He lifted his hand slightly, a quiet, invisible farewell. Hermione smiled through the ache in her chest. Then she climbed into the carriage, the wheels creaking as it rolled forward. As the castle disappeared behind the trees, she let herself breathe. The ache didn't fade, but it changed, turned into something steadier, something alive. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Weeks later, in a small flat overlooking Diagon Alley, Hermione unpacked her things. Books filled the shelves, parchments scattered the table. She found herself tracing the edge of her wand, remembering the day he'd taken it from her, the accident that had started everything. A knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find an owl perched on the railing, a small envelope tied neatly to its leg. The handwriting on the front made her heart leap. She untied the note and unfolded it. "You once said you believed in me. I'm learning how to believe in myself, but it helps to know you still do. I'll come to London soon. I owe you dinner, and maybe forever. D." Hermione pressed the parchment to her chest, smiling through the tears that came before she could stop them. The city outside was alive with light and sound, the world moving forward. But for her, that moment felt suspended, like the pause between heartbeats, between leaving and returning. She set the letter on her desk beside the ministry papers and whispered to the empty room, "I'll be waiting." And as the night deepened outside her window, a silver trace of magic, the faintest echo of a bond once broken, glimmered and faded into the dark. Because some connections, Hermione thought, aren't accidents. Some are choices made again and again. And this time, she was choosing love.